your student.
Hello, everybody. This is RJ Sheffield, who is one of my research students who spent fall semester developing a research project with all of the other co-authors. And they all kind of took a piece and then have one common sort of interest in the dark traits, and then they all added their own individual interests to it. So RJ is presenting the relationship between moral disengagement, schadenfreude, and the dark tetrad. So, go for it.
Hello, everybody. So, like Dr. Dempsey was saying, I was lucky enough to be part of the research group. That our main group was gender roles in the indifferences in the dark triad. I took an interest in moral disengagement, which is pretty much your scenario. The means meets the justice. So, take the trolley incident, if you've ever heard of it. Trolley's coming down the railway. There's 5 people on one end, 1 person on the other. Which group would you save? Would you save the 5 randoms, or let's say the 1 person was a doctor? Would you save them? In this situation, even though it is morally wrong to choose the 1 person, some people would. And moral disengagement pretty much justifies their means. Schadenfreude has to do with pleasure or finding pleasure from others' pain. But in most circumstances, people only find pleasure with other people's pain when it is deserved. So, such as a mean boss trips and falls at work, or a coworker who is lazy. Gets fired, pretty much. And the dark tetrad is 4 traits or attributes that are unsocially desired. The 4 are psychopathy, which is lack of empathy; narcissism, which is you put your self-interest above all else; Machiavellianism, which is manipulative behavior; and sadism, which is the last of the tetrad, but it is added on to this one. Typically, it's just the dark triad. So, for our research, we created surveys based off the moral disengagement scale. It is a 8-question scenario in which you're put in a scenario and then you rate how you feel about the outcome of the scenario. During the survey, I put it into 3 situations of schadenfreude, 3 different scenarios. So you have your school scenario, your work scenario, and your social scenario, just to see how the different dark triads relate to each scenario. The Machiavellianism was pretty high rated in all except for the social scenarios. I honestly, unless we did a little bit more research, I couldn't tell you exactly why the social scenarios were lower than the rest of them. Narcissism is seen as correlated in all fairly heavily except for school scenarios. I'm assuming that has to do with just being viewed as potentially an outcast, or not an outcast, but awkward in some way. Psychopathy is extremely high in moral disengagement, just because obviously if you have no empathy for others, you're not really going to care about the outcome. And then sadism, which is strongly correlated in all of the schadenfreude, which is pretty much you just enjoy inflicting pain on others. So it is easily to see why it is heavily correlated. And then one of the biggest limitations would be that the dark triad is often found more strongly in men than females, just for aggressive traits and so on. And we only had, sadly, 39 male participants out of 207 that were male. So we needed a bigger sample pool, but we just threw out the surveys in the classrooms to see what we could get, and I believe it lasted for 2 months was the initial timeline for it. And yeah, that's, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us an example of one of the scenarios, whether it was in school or social situation that you presented in the questionnaire?
So,
survey?
one of the school scenarios would have been, Tommy is known to be a bully to other people, and many people view this, they don't do nothing about it. And then Tommy has food thrown on him and in the lunchroom in front of everybody, and then as he's trying to get up and do something about it, he falls and busts his nose. How would you feel about the situation? Would you enjoy it? Would you be amused? Would you be regretful? So on and so forth. And then the social scenario would be Tammy, who cannot keep a secret. Anytime you tell her something, she goes and blabbers it about. And you're at the bar with a couple of friends, Tammy has a little bit too much to drink and throws up on herself. How would you feel about the situation? Would you be amused, pleased, happy, so on and so forth?
So is that how the potential responses were coded as those emotions tied to one of those variables?
We pretty much gave the person a reason to be potentially disliked for whatever the reason, whether they be just loud or they snitch or sorry, my mind's
No,
blank.
that makes sense. Thank you.
Sorry. Any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
The website you were getting the survey from, especially the sociopath anonymous, those anonymouses, did you find out what fields they were in, like what they were going for?
We did not. We threw in, so for the questionnaire, we asked for a year of school. So if you were freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. I didn't include that into it just because there wasn't really enough data to put it in. But I did not even know. No. I think, I want to say majority of the survey was from the psychology department. We threw a lot of questionnaires into a lot of freshman classes. That's where majority of our data came from, was the freshmen. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions.
Yes, ma'am.
The first one is, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand your study. Were you able to tell from the responses to those, just the responses to those scenarios, were you able to rank all of your variables there? Moral disengagement, Machiavellianism, schadenfreude, narcissism, psychopathy, sadism. Did you get all of that from their responses to the scenarios in the survey?
We had more than one scale on there. So we had, I think we combined, I want to say like 11 different scales on there. So there was more than just 8 questions. This was like a 100-question survey. But I think I did the moral disengagement scale and the schadenfreude scenarios were the 2 I added in there.
Okay, so there's different scenarios.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
There's many questions on there that pertain to moral disengagement.
And the second question.
In the dark triad, yes, ma'am.
Were you able to compare this with data from other studies? Is this an unusually high levels of
No, ma'am, it is
narcissism
not,
and
actually.
psychopathy
It is
in
not.
JSU? And if so, what can we do about that?
It is not. It is, there's been many studies on it. All the correlations combine to what we thought would happen and what previous research has shown. So the only thing different was there's not really a lot of study on sadism. A lot of the study has to do with the dark triad instead of the tetrad. But I thought, the tetrad would be interesting to fill in since there's not much about it. But yeah, it is all correlated with previous research. Yes, sir.
I guess I had two questions on that. So you had, I think you said that the social didn't show up as significant in your results.
In the Machiavellianism, yes, sir.
And so I was just thinking that when you look at schools and work, I see a lot more competition for status in there. There are people who do treat social area with competition and some people who don't. And I wonder if that's what muddies the water.
It could be. I see it as you just don't want to be a manipulated person in a group of people because it is very easily seen. So it may be something you wouldn't do even if you are kind of, even if you do manipulate people. You don't want to get kicked out of your friend group, obviously.
I see that, and the age group you were in was what age group?
Yeah, the age group was, I think, ranged from 19 to 24, 25.
And just a comment you said, I didn't realize, it was 100 questionnaire, 100?
It was a fairly big questionnaire, yes, sir.
I was just wondering about fatigue by the end of it.
That was actually a problem we discussed in a meeting, was how to narrow down how many we were going to.
But I assume the questions were randomly placed through the test.
Yes.
So still, I remember doing some of those and
After about the first 50, you're ready to just be done. Yeah.
I get them to get a lot of extra credit, and I'm like, do all the questionnaires. Yeah, there's 7 students that did research based on this, so all of them had at least 2 questionnaires and 2 of the survey.
It was a fairly long survey.
Okay, so we are just butting up on time for the next one, so we'll thank our speaker.
Thank you.